as part of the International Conference on the History of Economic Thought that's being hosted by Azim Premji University, we're very pleased to have with us Professor and Chair of the Department of Economics at University of Tulsa, Scott Carter, who is, in his own words, a heterodox economist. So Scott, first of all, thank you so much for speaking with us. I want to begin by asking you, what is heterodox economics? Because you call yourself a heterodox economist.
Right.
What is heterodox economics? Is it a school of thought or a paradigm that is sort of in competition with what we call mainstream economics or neoclassical economics? What is this thing?
Well, actually, thank you, and thank you for having me. It's actually, it could be a little bit of both, depending on your perspective. I think that the best way to understand heterodox economics is, of course, to understand that it's heterodox in relation to an orthodox economics. I mean, this is there is a symbiotic relationship that's occurring here. Now, and I think that's what, by just the very presence of being heterodox within this orthodoxy, is huge. Right? Because then it gives a sense of, wait a minute, this is, you know, the approach to economics that we see in mainstream societies and universities and think tanks and other such more mainstream entities that adopt the mainstream approach or the neoclassical approach or the antecedents of the marginalist, I mean the descendants, I should say, of the marginalist approach or the mainstream approach and all of its various incarnations. That is often, how to say, passed off, maybe is a little bit too of a loaded term, but it kind of feels that way. Effectively, it's meant to be as if it is the only way in which economics can be thought, right? And then that's what's being sold to the world. Okay, and so, and then of course, you know, the nuance of being heterodox within this orthodoxy is its own question, because then there's a sense of comfort being the, you know, the irritant to the master, you know, a lot of times, and which I think is problematic too, because I think that economics is an applied discipline in some parts. That's not, doesn't mean it's not theoretical, but it's an applied discipline. It needs to do with the nuts and bolts of society, of market society, of capitalist society. And you know, you wouldn't have a plumber tell you that your pipe's good when they know it's not structurally. We shouldn't have, you know, economists who are advising, you know, leaders to adopt policies that they know are going to hurt people, right? Or I think that what you see often, and this is, you know, this is where you get your mainstream economists, sometimes for hire, you know, out there to advise, you know, different entities. And one of the things that I learned about advisors is they don't necessarily tell you everything they're thinking. Right? So you have to ask the right questions in order to get out the right answers from these people and for them still to feign some type of not lying. And so in terms of how that plays itself out in economic theorizing, you present a mainstream approach. You don't say anything else about the other approach. You say, well, there is, well, okay. You get your errant heterodoxer come into an economics department and they'll just teach their course and they'll just be the outsider, and some people like that, and they get, you know, and that's unfortunate too. But I mean, we also have to live, right? And so I think that by celebrating the heterodoxy and all of its eclecticness and all of its differences and et cetera, in juxtaposition to a dominant orthodoxy, I think that that's something that the young generation can resonate with. Because I think that at some point, you know, to convince the masters of the science that hold the power that they're wrong, that's, you know, that's a Sisyphean task, right? Don Quixote-esque, right? You're tilting at windmills there because they're not going to listen, or they'll listen to you, take you to lunch, and then that's it. And then you say, well, you're scientifically wrong, or at least not right. I don't like to say that they're wrong, but they're not right about so much, right? And I think that as scientists, honest scientists, one would hope that they would be moved by that. Now, if they're not, and some are, Okay, but if nothing's moving them, they're not going to move themselves. Within, especially if you see orthodox economists that are within, they're thinking, and a lot of them are frustrated because they have some really serious problems to solve and can't do it with the crappy tools that they have, right? And that they're passing on to the next generation. I think Joan Robinson talks about in her article on the production function in 1953 that started the whole capital theory, saying, look, generation after generation are learning this aggregate production function as if it means something. And she speaks about how we're just passing on the mistakes. And it's important that I think the young generation understand that that's what's happening, because the people in power, they might admit it. You get them to a cocktail, truth serum, you get them on a panel and you can out them, but they'll just still walk in their Mercedes and go home. If there's nothing that can institutionally be there to, be some type of force to effectively, change the power dynamic in the favor of, of the non-dominant ones now, I'll put it that way. And there's a whole litany of those that are on that other side that I think can bring their experiences. I think the heterodox, we have, it's an open camp, and we can talk more about what that is. But in that sense, heterodox as opposed to orthodox, in that very particular sense, and I encourage all young people to look into that to get the right questions in the first place, asked about important answers that we need solved. We're not going to solve the climate change if we pretend that oil doesn't cause it. I live in Oklahoma. I mean, we're dealing with that every day because that's our money, that's our bread and butter. And whatever. And then that gets into the class dynamic, because then you got the oil workers, so the whole thing is just a mess. And I think that we owe it to progeny, to the next generation, to science itself, right? To leave this better than when which we got it. And if we know better, we should do better, even if it might not be the most fortuitous thing at the moment. But I can promise you sleeping better is good. Whatever happens in life, if you sleep well, it's okay. So even if you're poor.
So, but trying to zoom in on this, what is the difference between the mainstream and the heterodoxy?
I see it. I mean, that's a million different answers to that. Depends on who you talk to, and I think they're all right. I mean, multiple things can be right at the same time, especially when you're looking at a historical time of transition, which I think we're in. Right? So everything, when they speak about statistics being, the best bet of the next one is what happened before, when you're at the precipice, it's not. And things start to go over, then who knows? Then it's all kind of, okay, let's reestablish what these norms and bounds would be. Having said that, so I do think that the multiple things can be true at the same time, right? And I think that we need to understand that, especially when we're in this period of transition, and all have more grace to just understand that we're all or many of us are trying to do it. Some people aren't. Some people are nefarious, okay? You can't pretend that they're not, all right? But you can discern it without being judgmental. Having said that, for me, the answer to that question goes onto the theory of value, where I could look at a clear distinction in time, 1870, of the marginalist revolution and the movement away from classical political economy of the sort that we speak about at this conference, that Alex Thomas and Azim Premji University speaks a lot about in terms of the stuff we're doing here, versus the marginalist economics of 1870. And so how do you see it? Well, they have to answer the same question. How is it that the same quantity, how is it that a certain quantity of purchasing power, $1, can purchase different quantities of a variety of different things? Okay, what is it about these different variety of these different things that render them in some sense in the market commensurable to the dollar? That's a theory of value to me. To me, I get that theory of commensuration on. Now, not everybody feels that way. Now, if that way, you then, for at least the way I see it, you see 1870 as the distinction, where in the earlier classical political economy period, they saw that by and large, that commensuration was based on labor time. A labor theory of value, cost of production theory of value, however you want to see it, broadly speaking. I know there's so much nuance within that. That's what, again, young economists should know. There's so much to be done. When you truncate a thought and just stop it, There's so much that needs to be done that was never done because it was abandoned, and that's what we see. And we could come back to that, especially when we talked about Sraffa, because then you start seeing how modern interpretations of solving some of those problems can take it forward. Having said that, so you have a 1870, prior to that, some, labor theory of value, you had a classical political economy, what I think now you would call more aggregative models, capital accumulation, employment, growth, not scarcity, reproducibility. Sure, there's scarcity, but it was within the context of rent, which Ricardo saw in a particular context. Right? And so too the whole classical tradition. And of course, doesn't mean you can't get ideas out of them. Having said that, 1870 comes around. At the end of that, of course, comes Marx with his Capital. And the critique that he's able to show, in my mind, that, you have a theory of value, but you don't have a theory of profit. Marx says to the classical political economists. And they've fumbled on that theory of profit with Malthus and Ricardo and the debates that happened there, and that have just been, they're so well preserved in what Sraffa gave us in the Ricardo correspondence, and so little studied. There's so much that can be studied in these. Once the kernel of the ideas has been exposed, I think, in a way that can make it accessible to people. Right, that's where Alex and you guys come in, right? And then we come in. And we have to make that accessible to people so they can see, okay, maybe there's some answers here that we didn't see. Then comes 1870. 1870, you have a different theory. I like to say to my students, like Monty Python, now for something completely different. Now you have your theory based on value, based on exchange, on utility. On a specific concept of utility. Not is it just utilitarian, because that's a broad field. It's an idea of utility that presupposes a particular pattern of behavior that's normal or rational within this individual at a particular juncture, at the margin of constrained choice. So you have actually a two-part theory of value there, in the sense if you just have unconstrained optimization, okay, but you have to have that constraint. And with that constraint comes the marginalist way of thinking. You have the entire theory of value and distribution becomes different. Now they can explain the same thing. They can still explain how these things exchange for that dollar. So in that sense, they're successful. Right, and I think that what the next generation of economists should do is know that. Let's make the field fair, I say, for the future. And if they're in a fair fight, if they really win, you've challenged them to deal with their problems, which there are many, and we become better as a species, right? One would think, but I don't think they can, because they're pretty weak, I think, in terms of their ideas, and I think the young people see that. There's a story I could tell about the aggregate production function at a conference in Boston where, young people came out to me saying, what is this you said about the aggregate production function? I always thought there was a problem with that thing, right? But they're not taught these things anymore. Whereas I think that should be. The heterodoxy gives us that. Whether we can, on the other side, the differences therein, that's a separate question.
So actually, let's talk about the differences therein.
Yeah.
A lot of your work is, it engages in a comparative analysis
Correct.
within heterodox theories. Why is something like that important? And also, can there be one right idea in economics? If there isn't, how is it still a science?
Those are good questions. I think that, I first of all, to the latter question, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not unequivocal. I know that we can't now. I think that the current state of the science, there's no way that we can claim to be, that any one way is, and it would be anti-scientific to try to force that. So, the very quandary or the juxtaposition is what if we're honest enough to recognize it. Honesty is key. Scientific honesty and integrity are absolutely key. And if we don't have that, we're lost. We're just forget about it. Go to the beach or something. Don't go to the beach. Fight is what we do. But but if we give that ground, we just cede it, and then it's no fun, because then it just becomes a matter of reconciling one's own, and that sucks. Sleeping better, I'm telling you, is the best way. But it's important to recognize those differences because, like I said, it goes back to this question, they're not, the principle of not being correct when it applies against you needs to apply with you, for you too. It's certainly now at this juncture of our science. Now, I don't give the same credence to flat earthers. That's ridiculous, right? Because we know that the earth is not flat. We don't have to engage ridiculous notions, okay? But there is, especially when you're coming, I mean, you have to make this approach, because I think science is revolutionary, personally. And I think as long as we maintain honesty and integrity, we can weed out the garbage. Joan Robinson said that in the last published piece that it was posthumously published. It was an article she wrote in 1980 called Spring Cleaning. It was posthumously published in 1984 under the theory of prices under normal profits, or some longer name I can get you could put under. But there she talks about how all of the concepts that were bad need to go. All that are good should stay, but all that is crap should out. We are at a point now, what is it, 40 years later, right, where we're reaping what that's wrought. By not doing so, they've just been a redoubling of this. But it goes back to so in terms of the heterodoxy has to also honor that as well. We have to be much more, well, I don't want to speak for anyone. My observations, just my own thinking here, what I see ideal is a strong heterodoxy that really reinforces one another despite our differences. Okay, tries not to be the king of this small hill. Okay, tries to say that we're not in, that cooperation can work. It doesn't always have to be competition, and your ideas don't always have to be right. And wrong ideas, if they're honestly put forth, can change. And that's how growth is. And I think there should be much more of a nurturing to that. And it's really important to live how you speak. If you don't, then just packing the game in too. I mean, honestly, if you can't, you have to walk that walk, or else, I mean, you can talk the talk, okay, but don't prevent people that are. That's for sure. And that's the problem I've seen in some of the heterodoxy. They just, well, that's people in general. To get out of the way then. I mean, but again, it's the faith in the young people. They've got to just see it, and they've got to like, wait a minute, and demand more. And so I could see students demanding a heterodox diversity in faculty. Diversity is to be inclusive of a lot of things, including diversity of thought. And we should have, I would say a heterodoxer in every department, just like you have an econometrician. I mean, this is my wannabe. Certainly we need to have departments around the world that have heterodox, from the get-go. You don't have to, you don't have to dance around the inanity of the mistakes. It's like, it's so frustrating to have to dance around that. When you could say, okay, we recognize this is the way we understand you to think, but that ain't economics only. There's your comparative approach. So you can, if you have that vertically integrated, integrity, if you will, and a respect, even of the foes that are closest to you, which is it's always sometimes the easiest. They're the deadliest, man. Your friends, people you think you're friends, man. And so if we could understand that, and wheedle that out, then there's a bright future. So in terms of the different theories, sure. I mean, you can look at them, and different ideas can be true or relevant, especially in a very fluctuating discipline like economics. Like I said, we are in a period of transition of many ways, including economic theory. We should not be doing the same thing 50 years from now. We should not. 100 years from now, you're kidding me? We should be able to advance beyond it. And if people are not allowing that to happen, however it appears, then they're messing with you. And we got to be honest as academics. That's what we're here for. That's what tenure's for, isn't it? I mean, not just job security. You got to say okay and duck.
So a lot of what you have talked about so far has something or the other to do with power.
Yeah, abuse of power. It's the abuse of power. Power's okay. All right, in a sense. I'm not anti-power. It's the abuse of power. That's got to stop. And academic abuse of power within the discipline of economics has got to stop. Heterodoxy can challenge that. An honest heterodoxy can challenge that. And we're at the precipice now. We have to do it in ways in which we've never done before, because look where society is. And it's not looking good. And we have to recognize that. That's the legacy we have to live in order to pass this on to the next generation. And they want to hear it. They want to hear it. In India especially. That's why I love coming over here. I mean, you guys, you're the bomb, man. You got it down. The undergraduates have an understanding of, and this is in Hyderabad too. It's not just here, at Azim Premji, but in Hyderabad and other places where you have this understanding of the economy, which is, I think, appropriately advanced. And it should be the norm. And as we norm it, it will become. That's the point. I'm not satisfied being here. I mean, we gotta get this thing going on, man. We gotta get other people, younger people out there to take it in ways in which the old people won't. And they won't because they haven't. I mean, what do you mean I won't? Well, you haven't. I mean, you kind of have it there. I was like, the proof's over at this point. Now, it doesn't mean people can't come around. Of course, everybody can grow. I mean, heck yeah, I agree with that. But you got to do it. You can't assert it.
So in terms of laying down the pathway for students and for sort of, future practitioners of economics, I want to now come to the incredible work you've been doing with the digital archive of the works of Piero Sraffa. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, I can. The Italian economist Piero Sraffa was an amazing figure in the history of economic thought. Like, he's the best known economist that no one knows about, right? And it's such a shame too, because he was a tremendous force. And what's amazing about Sraffa is he has so much more to offer. Okay, and that's where, I mean, in some ways, he's the first 21st century economist, in the sense that he is going to offer a different way. I don't want to say it's alternative, but it's certainly unique in how he's developed the classical program, okay? And coming from that classical tradition, sidestepping completely. Like, he wrote his book, 1960. It's his opus. It's 99 pages, called Production of Commodities by Means of Commodities. There he a prelude to a critique of economic theories, a subtitle. There he laid out a manner of exposition of a particular question in the theory of value and distribution that did not require marginal theory at all. I mean, it becomes like we don't need this theory. Now, he could be read where he didn't have a labor theory value either. I don't necessarily ascribe to that, but the point is, this is what can be shown, okay? And so you got this book, like 99 pages. I think he purposely made it slim, under 100 pages. That has been, the birth of a cottage industry of Sraffians and the Sraffa approach, and it's just one book, man. It's a heck of a book, but I mean, there's only so much you get out of one book.
How many years did it take him to write?
30 years. 30 years it took him to make that book. 30 years in 3 distinct periods, in 1927, 2032, in 1940s, in 1955, and 1960. And in those 30 years, he wrote well over 6,000 mostly handwritten pages. Okay, and it's not all, all work, no play makes Jack a dull boy, or whatever, like in The Shining. He's a little bit obsessive compulsive. He's writing it over and over, but he's honing his approach. And so looking at the archive is an amazing experience to be able to see the birth of what he put into his text and also what he didn't put into his text. Okay, because he retells us in the book, it's a prelude to a critique of economic theory. Well, it's a prelude, okay? So there's much more symphony behind that, okay? And so we have to say, where can this go, all right? And to see that, you have to go to the archive. So the Sraffa archive has been made available. It's been digitized. It's at the University of Cambridge website. You can get it at the Trinity College Wren Library website, and you can peruse 5 of the 10 files in the Sraffa archive, the A through E, and it includes his constructive work. And it's a catalog there, the way in which you would find it on the in the Wren Library, if you were to go to the Wren Library. Now, the issue with that is that it's not arranged. It's not organized. Okay, so it's chaotic. All right, the manuscript cataloger, Jonathan Smith, he did an amazing job for what he was tasked to do, which is catalog the material. He was not tasked to arrange it. Now, the history of the Sraffa archive is very unique, and there is actually an arrangement that was an inventory before the Wren Trinity catalog, and that was done by an Indian economist, Krishna Bhardwaj, and Pierangelo Garignani, an Italian economist who was a student of Sraffa, who was Sraffa's literary executor after he died. Now, Mrs. Bhardwaj was very friendly with Sraffa, and they had a relationship since 1963 when she reviewed his book in Economics and Political Weekly. And a really wonderful article called The Exogenous Theory of Value and Distribution, or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it is offhand, and she nailed it. The first section of that book, she nails it. She sent Sraffa a copy. You can read it on his archive. And he drafts letters, so he keeps an account of his record with that. He loved it. He was in such a wonder, and he just thought that she had so much integrity and support for what he was doing. She was originally part of an inventory of the Sraffa material after he died. The whole archive's got to be over 30,000 pages. I'm just looking at 7,000 within a subsection of a subsection related to the notes on his book. But Pierangelo Garignani and Krishna Bhardwaj, they inventoried everything. And so what they did in that inventory is they approached his material, certainly his constructive material that I'm interested in, from the perspective of a textual approach. In other words, the archive consists of a collection of manuscripts, okay? And those manuscripts have meaning, and they have order, and they have context, okay? And I think that one of the unfortunate things that we've seen in Sraffa scholarship so far, and generally speaking of thinking about it, is a focus on the individual archive page. And this is archival scholarships generally, and that's all we had. I mean, we didn't have this. It was so sequestered, et cetera. We could talk about that too, but not to understand where it's coming within that larger context. So what I've done is I've arranged, I call it the Tulsa 1.0 arrangement. I took the archive, it's digital, and so I then arranged it. And I put it in, and I have the material from the 20s ready to go. I'm working on the 40s and the 50s. It's heady stuff. It's you want to get it right, and I do want to put it out in iterations so people can use it. But certainly from the material from 1927 and 1932, it's ordered, it's chronological. It interfaces precisely with the Wren Trinity interface. I created my own archival schema that the purpose person can read it. I have hyperlinks to all the different, you can collect, not only get the page, you can collect the documents within which that page is ensconced. You can read for yourself what the context is, and he numbers the pages. Bhardwaj and Garignani number the pages. Okay, and it was having the digital archive, I was able to see that, and by doing that, it really opens Sraffa to the next generation of economists, and I think he answers questions that are in political economy that were not answered. It goes back to that previous point, that were just truncated, they're left. Okay, and so nobody's asking them anymore, and then pretty soon you forget about it, and then you don't even know how to ask. And so Sraffa's saving that. He said, wait a minute, you can ask this question. This is, and the solution he spent his life showing is relatively trivial, right? Invariable measure of value, showing all this other stuff, but it allows for the theory to really catapult into new dimensions. That's how I see it. Whether or not it's the case, I don't know. I've been reading this stuff for years now. I'm telling you, it's in there. And I'm trying to get that out for people to see it. And to experience what Sraffa really wrote, and not what he really meant. That's so uninteresting. And young people generally don't want to hear what Sraffa's supposed to have meant. They want to see what Sraffa actually said. And they want guidance on working through that. And it's very interesting. to see that, because then it explores this unanswered question that can take it to the next generation, take it 21st century and beyond, right? Because we don't need marginal. We can have it, okay, sure, all right, but they're going to be, you're not going to be king of the hill no more. But it's got to be. I mean, I'm not making it up. They don't know what they're talking about. I mean, everybody should see that by now. They have no idea what they're doing. They're always behind the curve. They don't know what it. They insist on these models that are ridiculous. No one knows it. People but no one has anything better. We got something better. And by documenting where we are now, not documenting, but by hunkering down where we are now in an effort to take it forward, then I think we can catapult too, because we're at a precipice, man. We have an opportunity here too. Such an opportunity. And that's where heterodox programs need to sprout up all over this world. Hire heterodox economists for sure. Train them, hire them, give them jobs. So I think one of my former students who's actually here, she was telling me that you don't have to necessarily be just in a heterodox department. There's many things you can do with your heterodox discipline, with your degree. You just way of thinking, and we need more people out there, no matter what, thinking differently. And in order to create a critical mass of people in our democracies, our respective democracies, mine of which certainly is on life support. It's scary, and to see how power, you mentioned power, the abuse thereof just manipulates good people too. And for young people, you're not sold out yet, don't. Don't. People say, I don't know, figure it out. Come on the other side, it's better. Sleeping bed is better. But if you're not, we're not going to wait around for you. And that's what we have to put into the young people's ears. Because you're the one that's like, this could be the coolest summer you've experienced in your life. And it's hotter than heck in Oklahoma. And it could be the coolest. I mean, they're like, whoa, maybe then we can, do something meaningful for, and what classical political economy gives you. So it goes back to this paradigms, if I may. It goes back, it gives you a paradigm that's circular in nature, as opposed to linear in nature, right? Sraffa gives us that. He talks about the circular, and that fits in well with circular economy, urban mining, recycling. I mean, there's not a necessarily has to be a greed-oriented, wanton accumulation of unsustainable capital. I mean, you can define sustainability in terms of, your economy, your ecology, but also your income distribution. It's not sustainable when one person's got it all, man. That ain't happen. I mean, what's sustainable about that? So, then, and that is, those are the possibilities that exist within this theoretical milieu, right? That's been mostly unexplored, that we can, as opposed to this linear approach where you really do need to have, this capital accumulation. You really do need to have this unlimited growth. For your paradigm, you're right. You're logically right, but your paradigm's wrong. But look, that's where we're at a situation of folks. I'm not telling people how to think. I'm saying what the young generation needs and our science should provide is the intellectual honesty and integrity to give an honest, broad approach of what economics really is, and commit as a discipline to doing that. Now, they're not going to do it on their own. That's where you and I and everyone else around here come in. And we have to say, no, wait, we're going to organize, we're going to get it together, and we're going to demand that this is where we have to go. And then, and the proof's going to be in the heterodox economics departments, which, we need to get more of around the world.
But so I do want to thank you, Scott, both for your incredible work in creating a new playing field for budding scholars of heterodox economics, and for joining us for this conference and supporting young scholars who are trying to engage in this, diverse minefield of ideas, some good, some not so good, but trying to figure out for themselves what actually works to explain this world and hopefully try to make it better.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. All right.